Signal ka, ma'am, no?
Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga, maayong buntag sa tanan. I am Reese Lloyd D. Lasha, focal person of the Institute of Davao Studies of the Holy Cross of Davao College. And I will be your host and at the same time moderator of today's event. Welcome to the Institute of Davao Studies' first webinar entitled Mag-istorya, a webinar on the essence of historiography, heritage preservation, and local history in LGUs. Today's webinar will be the first of the Institute of Davao Studies webinar series as part of its aim to promote, preserve, and celebrate Davao's history, culture, and heritage. Before we will formally start our webinar, here are some reminders for our guests and audiences. Kindly ensure to edit your name to reflect your full name, first name, middle initial, and last name. This will enable us to properly acknowledge you and include you in our mailing list for the certificate of participation. Participants are requested to keep the microphones on mute during the discussion of the speaker. Participants may turn on their video cameras for the whole duration of the webinar. Active participation is highly encouraged during the webinar, especially in the open forum. You may type in your questions or comments in the chat box. State your full name and institution, government agency, or organization where you belong before you will type in your question. All of us are required to complete the webinar to acquire a certificate of participation. We will post the link to the post-evaluation form at the end of the discussion. After the submission of the accomplished post-evaluation form, the e-certificate will be emailed to the participants. If you have clarifications, please do not hesitate to let us know, or you may approach any of us here to address your concern. At this point, we shall have our opening prayer to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty and ever-loving Father, our God of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we praise your unending presence in the evangelizing journey of Holy Cross of Davao College. We glorify your name for bringing into reality the mission and commitment of the school, to be your voice, your hands and feet, that enrich and guide every young person entrusted to our care. We honor your name for all the wonderful things you have made for us and through us.
Thank you, loving Father, for all your guidance. Thank you for empowering us to be a part of the evangelizing mission of the Church. Thank you for blessing us with gifted administrators, dedicated faculty members, personnel, and students. Thank you for the growth of our institution, the number of our graduates who help us spread your word, and the humble contributions we all have generously offered to our community through all these years.
We ask for your mercy for the times we fell short of our mission, and the grace to rise from them and to stand again with even stronger zeal. Help us transform our failings into lessons and learnings, so that, gifted with your grace and abiding presence, we may all arise and lead our institution to greater heights in service and in giving.
Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior on the cross, who today conquered death by your resurrection, we entrust to you our loving arms, the future of HCDC. Walk with us in our doubts and fears, and enlighten us as you did to your disciples at Emmaus, so that, in all the challenges we face, we will see you walking along with us and enkindle the fire in our hearts to be ourselves the flame of hope for all we meet for years to come.
Among langit nun nga birheng inahan, o Santa Maria, nangamuyo kami sa imong inahanon nga paghigugma. Pinaagi sa imong panig-ignan ug pag-amuma, sa imong anak nga si Jesus kami mahigugma.
Uban kanimo kami nangamuyo sa gugma sa amahan kami mapuno. Sa ngalan ni Jesus kami nangalyuko, og sa Espiritu Santo kami nagaampo. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Davao, a melting pot of varied cultures and traditions, is home to a group of people who share a peaceful coexistence in the vast and rich lands of the region. The vast expansion and rapid growth happening in the region has made Davao as one of the most developed provinces in Mindanao and in the Philippines. However, this feat of modernization has its consequences and became a threat to the preservation and promotion of our history and cultural heritage. With the establishment of the Davao City Culture and Arts Council, the Holy Cross of Davao College wants also to embark on upholding the history, culture, and traditions of Davao region through the establishment of an institute solely dedicated to this purpose. Along with the vision and mission, from faith to truth, and upholding the values of servant leadership, dialogue, justice, peace, and integrity of creation, with wisdom as the underlying principle, the Holy Cross of Davao College created the Institute of Davao Studies, or IDS. The IDS is an institute established under the Center for Linkages, Internationalization, and Language Studies of Holy Cross of Davao College, dedicated to a mission in promoting the rich history of Davao and its cultural heritage through education, proper preservation, and research. IDS envisions to be the premier information hub for Davao-related studies and to form Davao region with citizens informed and proud of their history and culture. The IDS vision and mission is strengthened with its 4 pillars: heritage promotion, historic preservation, cultural relativism, and global integration. With these 4 pillars, the Institute will be able to achieve its goal in preserving and promoting Davao history and heritage. This year, IDS will strive hard and move forward in being the premier information hub in Davao region through its various activities such as webinars, historical research, and partnerships with government and non-government agencies. Join us as we embark this new journey of exploring, promoting, and preserving the rich history and culture of the Davaoenos. Tarabay, magkahiusa ta sa pag-amuma sa Davaoenyong kasaysayan, kultura ug tradisyon.
To welcome us in our first webinar, we shall hear the opening remarks from Brother Noel Vic H. Deloria, SC, President of the Holy Cross of Davao College. Let us give him a virtual round of applause.
To our guests here at St. Maximilian Kolbe Broadcast Center of Holy Cross of Davao College, our virtual audience, madayaw nga adlaw, maayong buntag kanatong tanan. I would like to start with a little trivia. And this will focus on the beginnings of the Archdiocese of Davao. The Archdiocese had its beginnings in the 19th century thanks to three missionary groups. The Recollect Fathers came in 1848 and stayed until 1858. The following year saw the Jesuits step into the lush forests of Davao. Then in 1937, upon the request of the Bishop of Zamboanga, the priests of the Foreign Mission Society of Quebec, the PME Fathers, came to Davao. Its official beginnings came during its establishment as a prelature nullius on December 17, 1949, having the Archdiocese of Cebu as its metropolitan. It was elevated into a diocese on July 11, 1966, and eventually became an archdiocese on June 29, 1970, taking as its titular patron Saint Peter. And did you know that Kapatian Island is really not about the white sand of the island? It's about one of the rattan species. Local history. Local history is very important to us because it is really about us and how we have influenced and are influenced by national and global history. Cars are already on our streets. Cars are around us. But have we cared to know who were the first ones here in Davao who owned cars? We have been flying Bangkirohan Bridge, which is also called Governor Generoso Bridge. Why is it called so? And did you know that the first Vitsin factory was established near Holy Cross of Davao College? Knowing our local history is capturing the soul of Davao. There's so much to learn about the Davao region, and we are happy to have Mr. Antonio Figueroa as consultant of the Institute of Davao Studies here at Holy Cross of Davao College that will be officially launched on March 4. Today, here at Holy Cross of Davao College, we are creating a new milestone. Welcome to this first of the webinar series, Mag-istorya ta. Again, mayong buntag kanatong tanan.
Thank you very much, Brother Noel Vic, for that inspiring message. Truly, the establishment of the IDS is a great step for the institution to be part of preserving, promoting, and celebrating Davao's history, culture, and heritage. A little historical fact. The month of March serves as the month of the Araw ng Davao, and tomorrow marks the 85th celebration of Davao as a chartered city. Although Manuel Quezon inaugurated it on October 16, 1936, it came into effect on March 1, 1937. Hence, Araw ng Davao. At this juncture, I would like to introduce to you the key speaker for this morning's lecture.
Our resource speaker is a graduate of literature at Rizal Memorial Colleges in Davao City, where he also earned his master's in English teaching. He took up philosophy at St. Francis Xavier College Seminary while under the Brothers of the Sacred Heart. He is a multi-awarded journalist and historian with 45 years of experience in research and writing. He currently writes a regional historical column in Davao in Edge Davao, a weekly paper, and manages the online historical site This is Davao History. An experienced educator, he was a former instructor of the Caro Foundation, a former assistant professor of Rizal Memorial Colleges, and a past vice president of the Davao Jones Academy. A renowned Davao historian, he was a former trustee of the Railway Industrial Heritage Society Incorporated and a past member of the Philippine National Historical Society and the Davao Historical Society. He authored over a dozen of books, including First 50 Years, History of the Brothers of the Sacred Heart in the Philippines in 2013, and the Dato Bago and the Kingdom of Sarangine and Iyo in 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Antonio V. Figueroa.
Sir Tony, glad to have you here in our Mag-istorya ta webinar series.
Mayong buntag sa tanan. Good morning to everyone. It's nice to be around to share my personal knowledge and experience on the importance of historiography, especially in relation to the numerous developments that we have around, it is always said that history is an important part in understanding what transpired in the past. Days ago, a letter to the editor appeared in the national paper, appealing to students to learn history and fight revisionism. The request came at a time when the subject about politics has jumped channels of communication. Lost in the jungle of fake news and distorted claims is the truthful interpretation of events and issues that are freely disseminated. As a result, we are confronted with a disorganized landscape. History is not just about past events. It is also the understanding of the developments as they transpired, getting to the substance of the occasion and understanding the essence and implication to the present is an undertaking a historian handles in arriving at a critical interpretation. Such process is what we call as historiography. Historiography is the study of approaches and methodologies that historians employ in developing history as an academic discipline or employed in studying a historical work that covers a specific subject. As a discipline, it was first begun in the 5th century BC by Herodotus, a Greek historian and geographer who is the founder of historiography. The historiography of a specific topic covers how a historian studies a specific subject by means of particular sources, techniques, and theoretical approaches. Scholars discuss historiography by topic and different approaches and genres, such as political history and social history. Starting the 19th century, a corpus of historiographic literature was developed that reflected much the loyalties that historians had towards their national causes, the beliefs and perceptions that affiliations stood for, or the pertinence of events that unfolded during the writing of these histories. Of interest, for example, is the way the Spaniards or the Spanish missionaries wrote their experiences, impressions, and notes. They were sent to the country for a twofold mission: to spread the Christian faith and organize settlements. Over time, interest and research have changed and moved away from old-style economic, diplomatic, and political history toward newer devices, chiefly social and cultural studies. Since the 1980s, there has been a special interest in memoirs and remembrance of earlier events, which are the histories as recalled and presented for general celebration. Philippine historiography refers to the studies, sources, critical methods, and interpretations used to investigate the history of our country. This includes historical and archival research and the writing of history. Outside the realm of archives, libraries, museums, and depositories, historiography also covers the study of artifacts, war memorials, surviving landmarks, indigenous cultures, oral traditions, geographic monuments, ancient stone slabs, dedicatory writings, church mosaics, petroglyphs, rock inscriptions, old coins, works of art, architectural designs, ceramics, weapons of war, transformation of ethnic beliefs, and even superstitions. History is, when compared with historiography, is very clear because history is about studying events in the past, especially those related to human affairs. Historiography, on the other hand, is about writing the history of the past. If history is the study of events that happened in the past, historiography is the study of changing interpretation of past events through the networks of historians, how history was written, who was the writer, and what are the factors that affected the way the accounts were written. Moreover, history connects with sociology, geography, anthropology, linguistics, genetics, and other studies. It also involves discussions of issues affecting agrarian matters, migration, tribal conflicts, biodiversity, politics, and religion, to name a few. Modern historians agree that while history is part of humanities or to the subjects related to it, this distinction is not precise given that the writing of a critical history requires the use of historical methods in contrast to developing literature or reporting events as a matter of journalistic exercise. As part of social science and being evidence-based, history is actually a scientific endeavor. Filipino historians fittingly point that two of the country's distinguished historians, namely Teodoro Agoncillo and Encarnacion Alzona, were conferred the honor as national artists, not as, or rather national scientists, not as artists. Historiography over the years has expanded. Two of these disciplines are philosophies of history and criticism. To achieve an accurate interpretation of historical events, these new concepts, known as the philosophies of history, are divided into four schools of thought, namely cyclical school, providential school, progressive school, and postmodernism. Cyclical school is a concept that brings to mind the often repeated saying that history repeats itself. In the 20th century, historians lean more towards the belief that events in the past can be replicated in the future. This assumption, however, has been getting its share of criticisms. Historians who are into multidisciplinary endeavors view this position as old-fashioned, arguing that history per se does not repeat itself, but the people and the circumstances that caused the events. Meanwhile, Prudential school is a school of thought that bears some religious undercurrents. It posits that history is determined by the divine providence and points to the struggle between good and evil as an important element in the development of an event. In the history of Crusaders, for example, such interpretation makes sense. But the more critical argue that the conflicts that saturate throughout history are chiefly human engagements. In progressive school, proponents of this idea assert that events are defined by repeated advancements in the rise and fall of settlements. For instance, is linked to the development on the ground. It contends that the forces that give rise to progress is not limited to a time frame, given that human history illustrates neither endless cycles nor divine intervention, but continuing progress. And the situation of humanity is constantly improving outside divine protection, but from the efforts of human beings themselves. In postmodernism, the concept takes into consideration the inherent nature of human progress. Postmodernists argue that evidence from the past takes new meanings because the present is so different from the past that they cannot directly communicate with one another. Moreover, historian Jules Benjamin explains that when historians search the records of the past, the understanding of the past that they bring in is heavily influenced by the methods they use or the questions they ask. On the other hand, we have what we call as historical criticism, which is actually a branch of criticism that investigates the origins of ancient texts in order to understand the world behind the text. It is comprising the several disciplines, including the more popular fields of academic engagements. These are source criticism, form criticism, reduction criticism, tradition criticism, radical criticism, and what we call as new historicism. I will focus more on source criticism, which is very important in historiography. Source criticism or information evaluation is a key aspect to understanding events. With the profusion of sources online, the dangers of revisionism, distortion, misinterpretation, misquotation, and imputation become challenges in getting an accurate historical picture. Online sources, whether archives, libraries, books, journals, interviews, blogs and vlogs, articles, columns and features, manuscripts, testimonies, diaries, logbooks, souvenirs, photos, or scientific findings require fact-checking. Comparing claims, evidences, and authorships with reliable sources written by experts, authentic scholars, and reliable publications can help interpret and validate the truthfulness of topics under scrutiny or criticism. Particularly in translated text, it is always reasonable to consult a language expert or refer to credible translations to get to the context of the documents and accounts being scrutinized. Listening to voices from many sides affords a historian better appreciation of the essence of historiography. Over the years, historiography has allowed academicians and historians to break open oral tradition and peel off the myths covering their authentic narratives. Let me cite few local examples or Davao narratives where tradition is critically examined and the truthful and true story behind is revealed. For example, deemed as part of the island garden city of Samal, these islets or atolls, known in Spanish times as Santa Cruz Islands, have adopted a new name today. When the Americans arrived, it was renamed after Major Hunter Liggett, the man who led the first U.S. Army unit in Davao Gulf. Over time, it became Liggett Islands. Major Liggett, who became Lieutenant General later, became the first American military governor of the province of Davao. Another example is the Dakong Banwa or Nuevo Iloco, as it is found in missionary chronicles. Actually, it refers to the town of Boston, which was first known by its present name in the early years of American rule. In 1905, it was called, quote, the seaport and most enterprising of all villages, unquote. It did not get its name after an old man's staff or sungkod, or we call it baston, but in honor of Boston, Massachusetts, USA. By 1907, it already hosted a night school under the auspices of the Department of Moro Province. Contemporary sources say Mintal, which is actually a district of Davao City, is a blend of the names of the native chieftain and a Japanese planter. Historical research, however, shows that long before the Japanese arrived, the place name was already widely used. The term Mintal comes from a kamote grown in the area, but can refer also to a kind of root crop that resembles the sweet potato. Remember that kamote is not native to the Philippines but Mexico. It was introduced in the region after the Spanish conquest of Davao in 1848. Another product of historiography is the word Mako, a town in Davao de Oro, which local historians always link to the Boholano word Mako, or big, or to Mamakaw Tree, which is a name also of a barangay in Malalag, Davao del Sur. Mako is not found in early American documents, but could have been used in the mid-1930s when Americans and their friends, Filipino businesses, explored gold in Mazara, which is a place in Mako area. The place name is likely an adaptation from the American Mako. Curiously, Mako town shares jurisdiction with Ihu River, known in Dutch accounts as Iu or Ihu. Both Mako and Ihu mean shark. On the other hand, you have a town in Davao Occidental, which is Malita, which is linked to the Spanish maleta, or a suitcase. But the Spaniards did not arrive in Davao until 1848. In 17th century Dutch records, Malita could already be found in maritime logbooks. In Sanskrit, a Hindu tongue, Malita is defined as surrounded by. Malita, by way of trade, could have arrived via Java, Indonesia, then a Hindu kingdom before the Moros conquered it in the 15th century. The use of word Malita as place name could have been given by the Moros. Another interesting topic needing historical inquiry is the name Datu Mama Bago or Datu Bago. It is attributed to Datu Bago, the hero of Davao River. In the August 13, 1804 report of Old Caraga Governor Salvador Jimenez Rendon, Datu Bago was known as Mukamad Amil Bangsa Harial, and in some accounts, Kamsa Israel. The name Datu Bago, incidentally, is all over, including in Sarangani, where there was a ruler who lived by that name long after the death of Datu Bago of Davao. Literally, Datu Bago or Datu Mama Bago means a new leader, which means that the name or the term Datu Bago is not a proper name but a mere appellation. From the Commonwealth period to the present, several historical books have been published, chiefly written by local authors, eyewitnesses, protagonists, and descendants of participants in Davao history. We will try to show you some of the books that constitute what we call as Davao historiography. The first book was Builders of Davao, published in 1938. It was written by Nicholas V. Pacifico, the Davao correspondent of Tribune, a national paper. Years after the war, trade directories, which are great sources of business and professional profiles, were issued. But it was only in the 1950s that Davao history became a focus in books. The first post-war Davao history book is titled Davao, Its Progress and Future. This was published in 1950 and written by Salvador Paces, who later became Malacanang press secretary. This was followed by Davao Culture and Progress in 1953, authored by Damian Mercader Lumukso, a Davao dean and educator. Lumukso also wrote and self-published a number of books that include The Brain. Another one is The Truth About Sabah in 1971. The Lord of Dabadaba in 1967, part of the saga of the International Yearbook of Foreign Policy Studies, the East and West Studies series, Mindanao Culture and Progress, Davao Culture and Progress, and a host of other books he wrote. The book that sparked strong interest in Davao history was Davao, Its History and Progress. It was written as a doctoral thesis of Dr. Gloria Bidabay. It later came out in book form and reissued. Many of the info contained therein have since been updated as a result of internet access. In the academe, that Ateneo de Davao University Professor Dr. Heidi K. Gloria published her thesis as a book titled The Bogobos, Their Ethnohistory and Acculturation. This was in 1987. She also wrote the book History from Below in 2014. Meanwhile, Ernesto Cosino, a former librarian of the United States Information Service in Davao, further raised interest in local history by coming out with a book using American sources. His project, Davao History, published in 1998, was edited by Dr. H.K. Gloria and issued by the city government in time for the National Centennial. It contributed much to the rise of historical awareness in the region and opened the floodgates to more Davao books. Award-winning Ateneo de Davao Professor Dr. Macario Chuk has so far written 2 seminal books in Davao history that have earned national honors, namely Davao 1899 to 1910, Conquest and Resistance in the Gardens of the Gods. This was published in 2003, and Davao, Reconstructing History and Text and Memory, published 2 years later. On the other hand, Redemptorist Brother Carl M. Gaspar, with a doctorate in history, authored The Lumad Struggle in the Face of Globalization, published in 2000, and also the book Davao in the Pre-Conquest Era and the Age of Colonialization, published in 2015. Another writer who has contributed to Davao's historiography is Jesuit social anthropologist Father Alberto Alejo, who penned Generating Energies in Mount Apo, Cultural Politics in a Contested Environment. Josepina C. San Pedro, who is a journalist, published the first biographical volume about Dato Bago Awards profiles, titled The Dato Bago Awardees, 1969 to 1995. This was published in 1996. Rogelio Lisada Sang-aon sa Davao, Once Upon a Time in Davao, a book set during the American occupation, was published posthumously in 2002. Other authors who have added to the growing stock of books on Davao history include Maria Virginia Morales with her book Diary of the War, World War II Memories of Lieutenant Colonel Anastasio Campo, published in 2006. You have Ida Rivera Ford's Uyanggurin, Forgotten Founder of Davao in 2010. Lolita R. La Cuesta, The Davao We Know, published in 2011. Marina Suaso, The Love Story of Don Jose Uyanggurin, published in 1994. You have R. Dennis J. Garcia, who wrote Davao Pioneers and Public Servants in 2005, and Vincent J. Garcia's 2-volume, The Leon and Milagros Garcia Family of Davao, A History and Photographs, published in 2019. Three of the important names you can find among the list that I have provided are foreigners. This is very important because they are not just foreigners, but they are people who were directly involved in the war or are important personalities in building up the Davao historiography. For example, you have Lieutenant Commodore Edgar D. Huaglan, who wrote the book The Seahawks, a memoir, published in 1999. Huaglan was the guy who led the invasion of the Japanese suicide boat headquarters at Piso, Banay-Banay, Davao Oriental. He was the commander of the American naval forces that destroyed the suicide boats of the Japanese that pestered the Americans during their travel from Davao City to the areas of San Agustin, Lupon, and areas in Davao Oriental. Another is Dr. John Russell Frank, author of the book On the Road Home, An American Story, published in 2010. Dr. Frank is not just your ordinary author. He is the grandson of Patrick Frank, the founder of Davao Light and Power Company. Davao Light was founded in 1929. His mother is from Zamboanga, but the more important thing is that Dr. Frank was born at Brokenshire Hospital. Another author which may not sound familiar to us in Davao is Captain Regino Giagonia. He wrote the book Philippine Navy, 1998, and published in 1999. He is the same guy who changed the historical origin of the exact date when the Philippine Navy was organized. He is the son-in-law of Davao founder Romualdo Quimpo. He was also a former instructor at the Rizal Memorial Colleges and Ateneo de Davao. He was also a commandant of the Philippine military training, the forerunner of today's Citizens Army training in some schools in Davao City. Understanding historiography is not just about understanding events, but it also has something to do with the way we appreciate the documents, the facts, the traditions that are brought before us. Historians, as a channel through which people may learn new things about their past by interpreting events, also carries the burden of being honest in their interpretation and telling people or the readers or whoever he comes in contact with about the discoveries he has made in a way that it coheres with actual events on the ground. A historian can always claim that a certain word has similarity with other terms in other places, but linguistics will tell you that similarity in names does not mean that the same word is having the same significance as in other terms that you find in other places. For example, you have places like Manat River, which contextually refers to as a rose water or a kind of water, perfume water in the Maguindanao language, meaning it has some kind of Islamic provenance or Muslim provenance. You have also in their Islamic belief word Almanat. So it sounds similar to Manat River, Almanat. One is always tempted to say that because Manat is rose water in Maguindanao language, it is most likely that the same term has also reference to the Islamic use of the word almanat. There are terms, for example, of so many places in Davao Occidental, Davao Oriental, that are translated in Maguindanao, but have different meanings if you translate it in Mandaya, Mansaka, or Tagakaulo. Linguistics, as I have always emphasized in many of my discussions outside, is very important because this allows the historian in building up his historiographic studies to understand the evolution of a place. Normally, migrants who come to a place leave behind some imprints. Like when you go to Corilla, Davao del Norte, New Corilla in Davao del Norte, it's easy to understand or to link that the early migrants were from Corilla, Bohol. When you say Nuevo Iloco, you know that the first settlers in the area were from Ilocos. And when you say that New Bataan, which is a town in Davao de Oro, it says something, although it does not necessarily mean the early migrants were from New Bataan, but it refers to the birthplace of the hometown of the wife of the governor then, Lorenzo Sarmiento. His wife was Los Mercado, was from Bataan in Luzon. There is so much in historiography that a historian can discover. From the undercurrents that come with studying colonialism to understanding the impact of evolving social dynamics. The role of historiography and the historian are indisputably significant. Accurate appreciation of facts by way of truthful interpretation makes history really a scientific endeavor. Finally, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to have you around. We have just ended our first session.
Thank you very much for the knowledge that you have imparted in the first lecture, Sir Tony. Telling history will never be possible without the concept of historiography and dedication to historical writing. Now, let us hear the questions coming from our Zoom chat box and maybe the comment section in our Facebook pages. Again, I am reminding everyone that before you throw in your questions, indicate first your full name and institution or government agency or organization where you belong. But first, ako muna yung magtatanong kay Sir Tony. Sir Tony, based sa mga books na na-present kanina, where could we possibly get or acquire these books about Davao?
Honestly, there is a dearth of, how do you call that one, copies of the books I have shared, because most of these books are published limitedly. No? It is because there is very little interest and support that you are getting from people, including the academe. Most of the schools we have now, they go to the online sources and only buy books that are of extreme significance to the subjects or courses that are being taught. If history can be revived, I understand that there will be a start in terms of interest that will allow for the reissuance of these books. These books are very interesting because these are works that have been the inspiration why we have reached this point. Before these books, there were no books or publication articles that really provided us a true picture of what Davao was about. There were, of course, the missionary chronicles. You have also the official history of the colonial governments. But the problem is, like the Spanish documents, these are written in Spanish. Only few know how to read Spanish today, and that's the problem. Now, I would encourage, I think, Sir Lloyd, that those who are present, that they start looking into finding these books wherever these are, because these books, while they are not bestsellers like the one you see on New York Times, but they really provide us some interesting nuggets which can add interest in the way we appreciate Davao history today. So I encourage, check your libraries maybe, check your teachers or instructors who are interested in history, maybe they can share their book. Or maybe to start with, in the absence of copies that can be bought from bookstores. Ask your friends who have copies of this to photocopy them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony. Next, we have a question from Mr. Christian J.G. Harabe of MCM. Any suggestions of historiography or data perhaps regarding the data of migrants in the post-war? What could be the possible good sources, Sir Tony?
There are numerous dissertations, actually, and of course there are peer-reviewed articles in journals that can easily be accessed through various platforms, maybe through Semantic Scholar, Google Scholar, and a host of other online sources. No? Because students of today are not interested in going to libraries, an added endeavor or diligence is required to go through the millions of historiographic writings that are found in credible sources. No? It's just a matter of using the right tag, no? So that you can go to the desired articles or journals that you want to access. Of course, some of these journals you have to subscribe. Be that as it may, there are many post-war articles about migration, which you can find online for free. Thank you.
Okay, we have also the list of books, no? Posted earlier sa presentation ni Sir Tony, a list of historical sources where we can get historical data about Davao region and Davao City, Davao City's history, culture, and heritage. And before we will proceed to the second session, I'm going to ask Sir Tony, no, the last question. Sir Tony, what would be the easiest way for Davao region's history to be disseminated, to be taught to Davaoenos and other people outside Davao region? What would be the possible easiest way to do it?
I will be discussing this subject later, but I would like to give a bird's eye view that dissemination of history, first and foremost, must start with local government units and the academe. No? Unless there is a strong interest in history and historiography in local governments, maybe through the Municipal Information Office, the Tourism Office, or the museum, if there is one, propagation of history as a very important discipline or subject or some kind of part of our understanding our environment and the politics that surround us will always be very limited. Another point is we have to encourage mass media to come out with broadcast or with programs on the air that treat about local history developments. Even in publications in Davao City, I think I am the only one who is writing fully historical column. But in the national scene, you have quite a bit. No? For example, Manila Times has 4 historians writing historical columns. You have one for Manila Bulletin. There used to be a historian or historical columnist with Philippine Star, but he died last year. Outside of that, I cannot recall of any other historical columns that are propagated in print media. So media is also an important player in propagating history. And of course, as it is now, social media plays a very important role. So when you want to learn about Davao history, I suggest you go to my account, Facebook account. This is Davao History, or the account, the Philippine Industrial Archaeology Society. So much have been introduced there about Davao history, and the researches that we have done or shared by my friends through me are all introduced there or published there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony. And that's a wrap for our first session. It's great to see that we have viewers who are really interested with the topic of our session. And now we shall have first a short AVP presentation of what Institute of Davao Studies is all about, and a short teaser to our launching program this coming March 4, 2022.
Davao, a melting pot of varied cultures and traditions, is home to a group of people who share a peaceful coexistence in the vast and rich lands of the region. The vast expansion and rapid growth happening in the region has made Davao as one of the most developed provinces in Mindanao and in the Philippines. However, this feat of modernization has its consequences and became a threat to the preservation and promotion of our history and cultural heritage. With the establishment of the Davao City Culture and Arts Council, the Holy Cross of Davao College wants also to embark on upholding the history, culture, and traditions of Davao region through the establishment of an institute solely dedicated to this purpose. Along with the vision and mission, from faith to truth, and upholding the values of servant leadership, dialogue, justice, peace, and integrity of creation, with wisdom as the underlying principle, the Holy Cross of Davao College created the Institute of Davao Studies, or IDS. The IDS is an institute established under the Center for Linkages, Internationalization, and Language Studies of Holy Cross of Davao College, dedicated to a mission in promoting the rich history of Davao and its cultural heritage through education, proper preservation, and research. IDS envisions to be the premier information hub for Davao-related studies and to form Davao region with citizens informed and proud of their history and culture. The IDS vision and mission is strengthened with its 4 pillars: heritage promotion, historic preservation, cultural relativism, and global integration. With these 4 pillars, the Institute will be able to achieve its goal in preserving and promoting Davao history and heritage. This year, IDS will strive hard and move forward in being the premier information hub in Davao region through its various activities such as webinars, historical research, and partnerships with government and non-government agencies. Join us as we embark this new journey of exploring, promoting, and preserving the rich history and culture of the Davaoenos. Tarabay, magkahiusata sa pag-amuma sa Davaoenyong kasaysayan, kultura ug tradisyon.
You have just witnessed a glimpse of what the Institute of Davao Studies is all about, and you are all virtually invited to attend the Paglusad, the launching of the Institute of Davao Studies, this coming March 4, 2022, at 9 o'clock in the morning to 11:30 in the morning. Live via our official HCDC Facebook page and the Institute of Davao Studies Facebook page. All right. Now we shall continue with our second session of this lecture. Let us give the floor again to our keynote speaker, Mr. Antonio V. Figueroa, as he will discuss the heritage preservation and local history in LGUs. Take it away, Sir Tony.
Daghang salamat, Sir Lloyd. Our second engagement will be on two very important items which have never been given full attention. One is heritage preservation, and another one is local history in LGUs. Heritage preservation, also known as historic preservation or heritage conservation, is a job that seeks to preserve, conserve, and protect buildings, objects, landscapes, and other artifacts of historical significance. Local history, meanwhile, is the study of the everyday struggles and triumphs of ordinary people that allows for in-depth research to connect the past with the present, which is done more simply and with more meaning than studying the national faceless masses. Let's get started. Heritage preservation is an interesting discipline. Like most historical endeavors, it is institutionalized by law. Republic Act 10066, approved on March 26, 2010, and known as the National Cultural Heritage Act of 2009, invokes certain sections of the 1987 Constitution, which called to foster the preservation, enrichment, and dynamic evolution of a Filipino culture based on the principle of unity in diversity in a climate of free, artistic, and intellectual expression. The same charter also has three mandates, which is actually to conserve, protect, develop, promote, and popularize the nation's historical and cultural heritage and resources, as well as artistic creations. It further provides that all the country's artistic and historic wealth constitutes the cultural treasure of the nation and shall be under the protection of the state, which may regulate its disposition. Actually, there are three objectives of RA 10066. To flesh this out, we have one, to protect, preserve, conserve, and promote the nation's cultural heritage, its property and histories, and the ethnicity of local communities. Second, to establish and strengthen cultural institutions. And third, to protect cultural workers and ensure their professional development and well-being. Cultural heritage has two components, the intangibles and the tangibles. Under tangible cultural heritage, there are at least 6 clusters, namely sites, which refers to historic and archaeological sites. You have buildings, of course, referring to historic and commemorative buildings. You have cultural landscapes, you have memorials, antiquities, and natural landscapes. Meanwhile, intangible cultural heritage refers to traditional performing arts, oral traditions and expressions, customary knowledge and practices, indigenous craftsmanship, and folklore. In colonial times, some important artifacts of history, such as fortresses, stone churches, and lighthouses, have survived chiefly because of the emotional attachments residents ascribed to landmarks that indirectly promoted the conservation of the memorials. Still, with the government having its own excuses for progress and the private sector introducing its own agenda of growth, the memorials are affected by expansion, land sorting, road widening, tourism initiatives, and more, and are sacrificed in the name of development. In Davao region, there survives very few historical landmarks that can be authenticated. The old Caraga Church, for instance, renovated many times is one of them. During American occupation, the new colonists also introduced their own landmarks in Davao City, namely the Victory Monument at the junction of Magsaysay Avenue and Quezon Boulevard, the Jones Bust at the intersection of Acacia District, and the Rizal Monument at the Magallanes Rotonda, where the Bonifacio statue now stands. All this, however, suffered different fates. No one exactly knows what happened to the welcoming wing statue at Magsaysay or where the Rizal landmark was moved. The Jones Bust, named after the American who authored the Jones Law, meanwhile became a victim of war. If there are landmarks that have survived the global conflict, only few remain. Two of these are the Habana residence along Rizal Street, which used to be a law office, and the Lat residence at Legazpi Street, which used to be a movie theater. Both date back to the pre-Commonwealth period. War literally flattened Davao. Nearly all the residences in the key structures in the central business district were destroyed in the efforts to liberate Davao. In a wild rampage, the liberators bombed homes and firms to flush out stragglers, while the enemy burned buildings in the retreat. The rebuilding of the city after the war gave rise to new structures. But against this backdrop, preserving these architectures decades later failed. Some of the buildings gave way to fire, poor construction, demolition, and replacement, with only a handful of them having survived. Many of the surviving landmarks are in a state of disrepair, renovation, or partial preservation. A short list includes the following: the Chungco residence at Carino Avenue, the Borgaili residence along Rizal, which hosts the office of the Manila Bulletin. You have across it the Obosa residence, also along Rizal Street. You have the iconic Antwell building in front of Magsaysay Park. And of course, the Davao City Hall along San Pedro Street, which to only few persons know how, was built by a pure Chinese company. Among those who succumbed to progress and disinterest are the following: the Fiscal's Office at Magallanes Rotonda, which has since been destroyed after it was occupied by Museo Davaoeño. The Philippine Long Distance Telephone Office at Acacia Circle, which is now home to the tallest condominium structure in the city. The Puriculture Center, fronting Osmeña Park along CM Recto. Only part of the basement has survived. The pre-war Davao Light and Power Company building has since given way to development, and what you have now is a very modern structure. The city court that once hosted the city jail is gone, and this is where you can find the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. The Prudential Bank building at the junction of Alvarez and Santa Ana streets, and there used to be another Prudential Bank building at the corner of Rizal Extension and Claro M. Recto. Both buildings have since been destroyed, and in this place you have modern structures. Then you have Salmonan Wharf. Salmonan Wharf actually is what we call now as Salmonan, where the Santa Ana police station stands. The original wharf is now part of or subsumed as part of the Magsaysay Park. Nothing can be seen or nothing is visible of that wharf now. And of course, the CYO Gymnasium inside Holy Cross of Davao, which was iconic but has given way to a new structure. Let's take a page from the book, The Pursuit of Local History, Readings on Theory and Practice, which says something about society's responsibility to historically preserve various aspects of civilization. And I quote, "Every part of the country is filled with the memorials of our past, tombstones and cottages and churches, names and legends, old roads and trails and abandoned mines, as well as the things we built and used yesterday. All these memorials bring us closer to the past. In so doing, they bring us closer to our own present. For we are living history as well as recording it. And our memories are as necessary as our anticipations. Communities seem to differ from individuals in this aspect, that their expectation of life grows the older they become. The more history lies in back of them, the more confident we are that more will live in front. A good past is a guarantee of a good future, and to preserve the records of what came before us promotes that sense of community, which gives us the faith to continue our own work with the expectation that our descendants will find it equally interesting. Heritage preservation is hounded by bureaucratic and judicial imperfections. Under our system, heritage cases or complaints are filed in court before a temporary restraining order is issued. Violative acts under Republic Act 10066 continue unless there is a court order stopping it. The case of the High Alay building and the condominium photo bomber in Manila are among the examples. Locally, the absence of an enabling ordinance allows anybody to order the demolition of structures not yet declared as historic landmark. With very few institutions and individuals passionately drawn to cultural heritage, all buildings are torn down to give way to more aesthetic and economically viable upscale residential and commercial ventures. Fixing the flaws in heritage preservation is a challenge that hinges on the emotional involvement of those who lead the LGUs. With politics as a more attractive option, Historic landmarks decay with time, and as a result, are brought down in favor of more productive endeavors. Now let's go to local history in LGUs. Guy Thurlier, a French historian who pioneered oral archives, has intensely defended that local history, despite its shortcomings and limitations, is a valid historical discipline. He cites 6 principles that define this field of study. 1, economic history. Economic history is a study that helps understand how an economy adapts to the challenges of times. In Davao's case, we can turn to ask why the once flourishing hemp or abaca industry plummeted despite its global stature in the early decades of the 20th century. We can blame the collapse on a number of issues such as foreign control, limited investments, land ownership restrictions, and war. Facts that historians easily find in academic articles. But there are also matters that influence the collapse of the industry. Among them, the export restrictions, classification of fibers, availability of marine transport, constancy of product prices, monopolistic practices, and variances between supply and demand. Economic history, moreover, is not just about income, money, business, taxes, or labor. We also have to confront issues of social import, such as employment bias, job placement preferences, migration, and the changing government policies on numerous issues. Second, local history is qualitative, meaning that statistics play a role in understanding certain events. The businessman who lends money, for example, controls the traffic of farm produce, including pricing. He states data based on choice, fearing that by reporting the accurate figures, it can add cost in terms of income returns, tax declaration, and personal wealth. The discrepancies in numbers can amount to confusion. Historians infer conclusions more on the quality than quantity, meaning the picture of an industry is reliant on the volume of transactions reported. Moreover, the appreciation and depreciation of agricultural deals is connected to seasons, infestations, product categorization, and farm and market prices. Qualitative history is also influenced by the measurement deals in transactions in relations to wastage, humidity content, and other elements of transactional marketing that players adopt in selling and buying products. Thirdly, local history should be flexible. The main argument here is that local history should not be rigid, unlike academic papers, which deal with specific and limited time frames. It takes also an approach towards understanding how a product has been affected or influenced by complementary factors such as fire, famine, drought, and floods. Fourthly, history is also sectoral, or the narrative of a certain sector. It refers to the history of, we can refer to the history of a cottage industry, a cooperative, a community's food tradition, the evolution of tribal weaving, hunt for the biggest crocodile, the great flood that hit a barangay, the rise of migrant communities, or the discovery of a waterfall, mineral deposit, or underground river. History is about proceedings or perception of events involving a certain segment of society. Fifth, history relates to daily life, particularly the culture and tradition of the place that is made more colorful by integration, migration, intermarriage, and related factors. It is the pattern of activities happening to families, but with relevance to the community. One can talk about the early morning pandesal ration the baker delivers, the shout of the potomaya vendor, the bahalina factory next door, the new celebrity in the village, or the marriage of two individuals from families with high means. Finally, local history is a comparison between contemporary events or an analogy of occurrences in the past but are linked to the present due to similarities or variances. It can be associated with the saying, ganito kami noon, paano kayo ngayon? Comparative history is an appreciation of historical developments in relation to the lessons from the past that can be applied to the present. The differences between two similar events often afford us a better comparison on how historiography works in understanding history. Historical endeavors about LGUs, local government units, are comparatively small, but not limited to academic studies and historical societies. Journals and other publications published by sectarian institutions reflect the wealth of historical studies that brought together the values of discoveries from other fields of endeavor, including anthropology, archaeology, sociology, and genetics. In Davao region, historical initiatives, sad to say, are existent only in a number of campuses. It is also important to touch on what we call as etymology and orthography. Local history is an exciting study of details. Some of these are hidden in plain sight, especially in etymology and orthography. History becomes an exciting field to explore. Now, what do you mean by etymology? Etymology is actually the study of the origin of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout, and it is also about the origin of a word and the historical development of its meaning. Orthography, meanwhile, is the conventional spelling system of a language or the study of spelling and how letters combine to represent sounds and form words. Local history is also what we call as a riverine history, given that early settlements were started along banks and their place names are after waterways. These communities used rivers for transport, delivery system, food source, for bathing and washing, and domestication of fowls. Many of the villages got their names after plants, animals, astronomic events, terrain, and other visible, tangible, and spiritual experiences. Let us make an interesting journey into how places in Davao region and adjacent areas have evolved using etymology and orthography. A number of places in the region have been named after trees. These include the original name of New Bataan, Davao de Oro, which was Kabinuangan, named after a tree known as Binuang. Mabini Davao de Oro was formerly known as Kwambug, which is also a tree. The name Kwambug brings to mind another place in Lanao del Norte, which is Kulambugan. You have the original name of General Santos City as Dajangas. Dajangas is a tree. You have Hagimitan, a barangay in Moncayo, Davao del Norte, a waterfall in Samal, and a forest reserve in San Isidro, Davao Oriental. Hagamitan is a tree. And what else? You have Banay-Banay, a town in Davao Oriental, which is named after a tree. Among the places named after plants are Agdao, a district in Davao, which is actually a mangrove. You have Hagonoy in Davao del Sur, which is actually a weed. You have Piapi, a district in Davao City, which is actually a mangrove. Then you have Tagom, known in English as an indigo plant, or decades ago as Añel, the source of Añel, is now is name of the city in Davao del Norte. And of course, you have Manay in Davao Oriental, which is actually after a flowering plant. Words that are related to fishes or fishing include darong. Darong actually is similar to the indangan. Synonym of darong is indangan, which is known in Cebuano as labahita. You have iho, which is a shark, of course, and you have meko or mako, which is a shark, and you have togbok, a district in Davao City, which means to use a spear in fishing or to spear fish. And when you talk about ratan, you have kaputian. This is from the word putian, which is a species of ratan. You have laak, which a species of ratan, a variety of ratan endemic to Davao. And of course, Bislig, a city in Surigao del Sur, is named after a ratan. But the more abundant place names got their appellations from rivers or related to waterways. Caraga, which is also a town in Davao Oriental, and the name of a tribe is actually named after a river. Malalag, which means yellowish river, is a Bagobo term, and it also refers to a town in Davao del Sur. Sumlog in Lupon, Davao Oriental comes from sulog or water current. Mati, Maragusan have nearly the same meaning. So Mati is the city of in Davao Oriental, and Maragusan a town in Davao de Oro. They mean easily dried up river or parched river. Bansalan, a town in Davao del Sur, is named after a boat's helm. It is a Bagobo term. Bansalan is a Bagobo term, and in Spanish you call it timon. Digos, which is similar to the Ilocano digos, no? The word digos in Ilocano is actually to bathe in the river, to take a bath in the river. And you have Kapalong, a town in Davao del Norte. It means to douse with water sprinkled by the current of the river. You have Sulup, which means rushing waters. And Katiel, also similar to Mati and Maragusan, or a stream that easily dries up. There are two places in Davao region that are named after tribes, or two towns named after tribes, the Talaingod of Davao del Norte, and the Samal, a city in Davao del Norte also. And the word Pantukan, which is a Mansaka term, means place to shortcut or the shortest way to pass between 2 points. No? Geography, we have Nabunturan. Of course, everybody knows that Nabunturan comes from Bungtud. Nabunturan means hilly terrain. Mawab, on the other hand, a town in Davao de Oro, means plain or valley. Santa Cruz, a town in Davao del Sur, is not about the Holy Cross, but it means crossroads. And Monte Vista, also in Davao de Oro, means mountain view. And for animals, we have very interesting towns that have adopted provenance using animals. One is Kiblawan of Davao del Sur, which means place of bats. You have Miral after the Visayan leopard cat, meaning Maral. And of course, Sarangani after the swift bird that produces the expensive bird's nest. Although there is another school of thought that Sarangani comes from Sarangini, a Sangil word meaning this is our territory. We have also places named after foreign names: Compostela, Moncayo, Tarragona, and San Isidro, who is a Spanish saint. You have also names, place names with American provenance, like Oregon in Davao Oriental, which is a barangay in Governor Generoso. You have Piso. You have Piso in, Piso is Spanish. You have Boston in Davao Oriental, a town in Davao Oriental. You have Bolton, a barangay of Malalag, Davao del Sur. You have Mount McKinley and Mount Washington. Peaks, these are peaks, mountain peaks beside Mount Apo. And Roscombe Village, a community in Padada, Davao del Sur. Oregon, a barangay in Governor Generoso, Davao Oriental, is named after the troops, the American troops that were first assigned in the area that was named Oregon. There are also places in the region named after individuals, and I'll cite all of them because they are places of or towns or important areas in the region. Don Marcelino in Davao Occidental, after pioneering Filipino abaca planter Marcelino Maroya. You have Braulio E. Duhale, Davao del Norte town, after an Ilonggo pioneering migrant. You have Jose Abad Santos in Davao Occidental, named after a Supreme Court Chief Justice who was also acting president after Manuel L. Quezon left for the United States. You have Magsaysay in Davao del Sur after a president, Mabini in Davao de Oro after national hero. You have Governor Generoso in Davao Oriental after the three-time Davao governor, and you have Carmen, a town in Davao del Norte, named after the mother of Davao Congressman Ismael Veloso. But according to latest research, that the name Carmen was actually suggested by Alfredo Abayon, the first mayor of Tarragona, Davao Oriental, who was a relative of the congressman. Abayon was from the town of Carmen, Cebu. To enhance and commit history in LGUs, some of the suggestions that can bring closer will bring us closer to our historical objectives include: first, create a cultural and historical affairs office or a position headed by a person with knowledge in history or a historian. Second, encourage the members of the tourism and information offices to acquire skills in understanding and writing history. Third, pass a law requiring the tourism and information and cultural and historical offices, the heads of these offices, to study history or earn a degree in history. Fourth, pass a law requiring the LGUs to establish public libraries serving as book depository, museum, and archive. Fifth, pass an ordinance making local history a part of educational curriculums of secondary and tertiary schools in the LGU's jurisdiction. Six, for the LGUs to sponsor scholarship in schools for the purpose of enrolling tourism and information chiefs as future public historians. And finally, for the LGUs to publish their official history, which can formally be used for documentary and information purposes. The list of options that can strengthen historical awareness in LGUs is long. But the push to make history as a vital aspect of local governance should be embraced as a municipal undertaking. Remember that national history and its brass tacks start locally. History, first and foremost, is the history of and from the grassroots. Congress, before the enactment of Republic Act 10066, has already introduced in the Local Government Code of 1991, or Republic Act 7160, features that imbue or give the LGUs the discretion to handle issues related to naming of place names, protecting national parks, preserving historical landmarks, and declaring certain areas in its territory as outside the commerce of man. In the national scene, agencies like National Historical Commission of the Philippines, National Commission for the Culture and the Arts, National Commission for the Indigenous Peoples, and the National Commission for Muslim Filipino have been given the task to protect the country's historical interests. Moreover, public historians in applying historiography must have the fortitude to tell what is truthful. Although there are instances when factual discoveries at times affect reputations, the historian can always apply the prerogative to present the evidence without sounding antagonistic and intimidating, but without skirting the issues. Finally, local history must be written as a compilation of details gathered by members of a committee. This allows a broader appreciation of the events that occurred in the past and provides a higher degree of accuracy when it comes to unraveling the truth. Details from oral tradition, family narratives, parochial records, and tribal practices can effectively contribute to the writing of a sound, sensible, and factual historical book. With that, I end my paper. Daghang salamat.
Are you all interested now to know more about your local history? Thank you very much for that insightful lecture, Sir Tony. Here in the Institute of Davao Studies, hopefully we will be partnering with LGUs across Region 11 in promoting and creating discussions on their respective local histories. With that, let us now hear the questions coming from our audiences in Zoom and in Facebook Live. Reminder again that you need to indicate your full name and institution, government agency, or organization where you belong before you will state your question. But first, I'll be the one asking again to Sir Tony. Sir Tony, how is it important to connect history or local history in tourism? How is it important?
Very important because a fully equipped, historically, tourism officer can convey to the visitors, for example, important aspects of history, why a certain landscape, for example, natural phenomenon or landmarks or whatever is part of the historical heritage that is being sold out to visitors and guests. A proper understanding on the evolution of landmarks, especially the events that transpired, its significance in terms of the people living there, the influence it has brought upon those who were involved in certain events, for example, war, make up for a good paper, that we call it paper or documentation for a tourism officer. A tourism officer equipped with historical knowledge is always confident to tell how significant or important, for example, a building, for example, a forest or anything like that, to those who are interested to know about the history of a certain place. In Davao City, for instance, as was cited earlier, there is this wrong impression that the Governor Generoso Bridge was named after a son of the governor named Anuncio or something to that effect, Arsenio. But the truth is, the Governor Generoso Bridge was inaugurated in September 1930, long before the war erupted and when Governor Sebastian Generoso was still the governor of Davao. It was dedicated to the governor because at that time, there was no law restricting the naming of public landmarks, places, artifacts, or whatever after a living person. So that's one. Another point which is important, like when you go to Davao, I mentioned it in passing in this lecture that Davao City Hall, when it was first built in the early 1920s, very few know that it was built by a Chinese company. At a time when Chinese link with the government is disputed or being the center of controversy, it allows us to appreciate the historical value of the events that transpired on why we have now City Hall. No? So from early 1920s, you have the Chinese company, I forgot the name, but it was a Chinese company. Then during the war, it was destroyed, but not everything about Davao City was destroyed. But the thing important there is that some of the structures, the stoas or the pillars you can see in front, these are reminiscent of the first structures of City Hall. Before Davao City became a city in 1937. There are other areas which have been covered by the ever-changing landscape brought about by the desire to make buildings beautiful. It's a sort of thing that we don't have a law that, or rather an ordinance that requires heritage structures declared or not declared to get the permission of the city. There is a law and there are other circulars and executive orders which allow the declaration of certain places or landmarks or milestones, which also in turn limit the destruction of these heritage sites. No? Unless a place or a site has been declared historical, anybody who owns it can always do what he wants. But if it is declared a historical landmark, a historical site, everything must first get the approval of the National Historical Commission.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony, for that question. Again, I invite everyone to please throw in your questions, anything about the role of LGUs, to the essence of historiography, and everything about local history. And Sir Tony, I also have one question that popped out in my mind. No? What would be the chance, or is there a big chance for local histories to be taught in schools in the near future, Sir Tony?
There are issues that I have to consider. One is schools have to open courses, no? Or if not courses, make it make history an elective, or maybe make it part of the regular curriculum, although it is not about a degree, no? But introducing local history as part of a curriculum is very important. Another point is teaching history is good, but as of now, we are limited by the fact that there is no history or textbook about local history, specifically about Davao. So there is actually an urgency to come out with a Davao history book which can be used as textbook in academic institutions. What we have now are books written and can be classified as references. So that's another point that must be taken into consideration. And I think the city government, through the city council, has been doing enough in finally pushing for the issuing of an acceptable history, or I would say scholarly history about Davao City.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony. No, so hopefully we will have a Davao history book or a history book that comprises everything about Davao region. Okay, so we have a question from Mr. Roland A. Dalagan from Davao Oriental State University. His question is it necessary for a public historian to possess a rudiment knowledge of philosophy of history as a lens in interpreting history? Sir Tony.
Yes, very much. You are talking about rudiment knowledge or the fundamental knowledge of philosophy. It is important because when you go through historiography, it's about analyzing or interpreting events. And interpreting events is not limited to knowing the interpretation of an event through your friends, through the books, but also has something to do with other fields like linguistics, ethnology. History has become so broad that a historiographic interpretation of events is not only dependent on what we call as dull history, meaning unpolished history, which you can read in the official histories of LGUs now. History now, as a discipline, requires an appreciation on why these things that you are studying, be it oral or documentary, transpired. You may be uh, knowledgeable in some aspects, but there are things that cannot be readily understood on the surface. I'll give you one example, two examples rather. One, Laak, Davao de Oro was officially created as a town named San Vicente. The same way that Maragusan in Davao de Oro also was created as San Mariano. The first thing that comes to mind is that San Mariano and San Vicente are names of saints. That is far from the truth. Actually, what Marcos did was to adopt an old missionary practice of adopting the name of the leaders of a settlement as the name of a certain place and adding the prefix San. So you have San Vicente and San Mariano. Actually, Vicente in San Vicente is Vicente Duterte, the former governor of Davao. And San Mariano, or the Mariano in San Mariano, is named after Mariano Marcos, the grandfather of Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. As an added tidbit, Mariano Marcos was a former deputy governor at large of Davao City. That was towards the end of the American occupation in Davao region.
Okay, Sir Tony, thank you very much for that. Okay, now we're back and let's have another question from Mr. Christian J. Harabe. Would you agree, sir, that social memory can distort history? And how can we meet it with history?
Social memory actually, like any memory, should be interpreted based on empirical facts. You have so many documents, oral traditions to compare what social memory shows you. Understanding history actually is not merely relying on the say-so of somebody, but it allows us to understand history more broadly by doing additional research. There is not just one person who has a social memory or an oral tradition about an event which is being handed down from one generation to another, but There are many of them. Of course, there are always distortions that happen along the way. And when I say distortion, it means the adding of details, embellishments to the actual events that happened over 4 or 5 generations. And a good historian, using his critical mind as a historiographer, can always get the meat or the closest interpretation to an event that transpired maybe 200 years ago, based on oral tradition or what you call the social memory of the people, or through the documents that are available, maybe through some practices that are still being integrated in the way we celebrate the fiestas, our marriage ceremonies, and so forth.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony. Next, we will have our last question from Mr. William Felistarta of USEP. How could we possibly integrate the study of local history in the tertiary or secondary level, considering that we have also limited background in local history? So, paano, sir?
That's a very nice question. First is, prior to the integration of history in social science, as a result of K-20, K-12, something, no? Basta, after history per se, or the subject of history per se was integrated in social sciences, the truth about pure history has been diluted. So it's hard to determine which is history and which is perception, which is commentary and everything, because we are fed with so much details that we cannot even trace where these details came from, whether these details have historical basis or none. Study of local history as part of secondary or tertiary level is, I would consider it, I will divide it, no, secondary level first. In secondary level, a teacher should have the initiative to read books and introduce history in a way that she can or he can. While in tertiary education, it should, the teacher or instructor should depend on existing researches about history. Because tertiary means higher level, secondary, which is high school level. The best way to reactivate, I would say, historical interest as a subject or as part of curriculum is make history a subject again, part of the curriculum. So when a teacher goes to the class, he is compelled to research about history, and given an hour of instruction, he will be teaching pure history. But if history is integrated with social science, a teacher who is not knowledgeable about history will never venture into talking about history for fear that his more diligent student will argue against what he or she is saying. Now, considering the limited background in local history, there are already an emerging, how do you call that one, stockpile of historical research about Davao. It's a matter of first, getting access to these researches. Second, buy the books about Davao. Third is read columns or whatever articles you have online. And fourth, if you have the time, link with the historians or people who are interested in history so that you can get a grasp on the beauty of what history is all about.
Wow, very wonderful answer, Sir Tony. And moreover, the Institute of Davao Studies will be, in the near future, will be offering short certificate programs for local history or trainings na related to learning history, especially to teachers and instructors now in the social sciences or under history. And meron pa tayong pahabol po. We have one question from one of our participants in Facebook Live. We have Miss Leila Noel. Are memoirs or personal memories or personal documents, journals about a hometown, can it be a contribution to local history?
Very much. There was a book I included in the first part of our lecture on historiography. The book author is Hiroyuki Mizoguchi. He wrote the book Jungle of No Mercy, Memoir of a Japanese Soldier, published in 2010. The importance of Mizoguchi's book is that this Japanese was the same guy who issued the Certificate of Good Standing to Davaoeños. Meaning, when war erupted and you were not issued a certificate of good standing, you are condemned to death. You would be executed. The beauty about Mizoguchi is that he graduated high school sa Davao City High School. And when the war broke out, he was hired by the Japanese Kempitai as interpreter. And as interpreter, he was the one who told the Japanese administration, imperial administration here, that that guy is good, because the Japanese administrator did not know Cebuano. Most of those that Mizoguchi saved from execution were close family friends, classmates, and those Davaoeños he knew were very good people. He issued certificate of good standing, and many of those who survived has so many memories about Mizoguchi. And finally, Mizoguchi is also the same guy that can provide us what actually happened during the first week of Japanese occupation, when Filipinos were incarcerated at what we call now Camp Domingo Leonor, and because the population of war prisoners was expanding, they were transferred to the Capitan Tomas Monteverde, where many people died. They were there interned for some time before others were allowed to move out because of Mizoguchi. So it's important also to appreciate who is writing what, because this allows us a first-hand account from the author who was part of the event that transpired in the past. You will know if he or she is lying by comparing his testimonies with those other documents that you can easily acquire now because of the free resources we have.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Tony. Moreover, the Holy Cross of Davao College also offers BA History as one of its courses in the institution. This is also one way for the Institute of Davao Studies to help future students in learning history and be part of people who's going to preserve, promote, and celebrate the history. And that wraps up our open forum for the second session. And we thank everyone here in the IDS for your participation and interest in our two lectures this morning. This is just the start of our series, and I can see that everybody seems to be interested in knowing more about the concepts in history and in heritage. At this point, the Institute of Davao Studies will now award the Certificate of Appreciation to our keynote speaker for this morning. I'll read the certificate. The Holy Cross of Davao College, Institute of Davao Studies presents this certificate of appreciation to Mr. Antonio V. Figueroa for being the resource speaker in Mag-istorya, a webinar in the essence of historiography, heritage preservation, and local history in LGUs on February 28, 2022 via Zoom, given this 28th day of February 2022 in Davao City, Philippines. Signed, Ms. Cheryl J. Urdaneta, Head, Institute of Davao Studies, Dr. Teresa P. Fabiana, Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Brother Novelvic H. Deloria, HCDC President. A virtual round of applause for Sir Tony. Thank you very much for your time in sharing your expertise in history and dedication to Davao Studies. Please do not forget to click the post-evaluation link indicated in our Zoom chat box as the basis of our e-certificate as participants in this webinar. Please check the details in the Zoom chat box. As we formally end our webinar, let us hear the closing remarks from the Vice President for Academic Affairs of the Holy Cross of Davao College, Dr. Teresa P. Fabiana.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Sir Tony and Sir Lasha. Before we have our lunch and say goodbye for now, I would like to thank everyone for attending the first webinar series of the Institute of Davao Studies. I want to commend the men and women behind the success of establishing the Institute of Davao Studies. Months ago, it was just a dream, but all visions come into reality with perseverance, hard work, and commitment. Thank you for everyone's support, especially to our President, Brother Noelvic H. Deloria, members of the President's Council, Ms. Cheryl Ordaneta, Head of the Center for Linkages, Internationalization, and Language Studies, Focal Person Mr. Reese Lloyd Lasha, Head and Staff of Social Communication and Alumni Affairs, Technical Team, members of the IDS team, and Mr. Antonio Figueroa, our consultant and speaker. Thank you so much, Sir Tony, for sharing your time and expertise on the essence of historiography, heritage preservation, and local history. This is just the first of a series of webinars that will educate the students and the public about historical and cultural preservation, especially here in the Davao region. Knowledge sharing is an important part of what we do. And that is what the HDC Institute of Davao Studies advocates. To conclude, let me say that we all want to share the importance of historical and cultural preservation with everyone in the 21st century. I hope to see you all in the future webinars. Thank you and God bless everyone. Maayong buntag, Davao.
Thank you, Dr. Fabiana, for that wonderful message. This ends our first Institute of Davao Studies Mag-istorya webinar. Thank you very much for your participation, and do not forget to answer the webinar evaluation sheet before leaving. The attendance and certificates of this webinar will be based on your pre-registration and completion of the evaluation sheet. We hope to see you this coming March 4, 2022 at 9 o'clock a.m. to witness Paglusad, the launching program of the Institute of Davao Studies. live via Zoom and also in our HCDC and Institute of Davao Studies Facebook pages. If you have more queries and concerns, feel free to message us in our Facebook page, Institute of Davao Studies, Holy Cross of Davao College, or email us at instituteofdavostudies@hcdc.edu.ph. We hope to see you again in our upcoming webinars in the following months, and stay tuned for more updates, announcements, and activities from the Institute of Davao Studies through our Facebook page. Once again, this is your host and moderator, Riz Lloyd D. Lasha. Daghang salamat ug maayong buntag sa tanan.
Davao, a melting pot of varied cultures and traditions, is home to a group of people who share a peaceful coexistence in the vast and rich lands of the region. The vast expansion and rapid growth happening in the region has made Davao as one of the most developed provinces in Mindanao and in the Philippines. However, this feat of modernization has its consequences and became a threat to the preservation and promotion of our history and cultural heritage. With the establishment of the Davao City Culture and Arts Council, the Holy Cross of Davao College wants also to embark on upholding the history, culture, and traditions of Davao region through the establishment of an institute solely dedicated to this purpose. Along with the vision and mission, from faith to truth, and upholding the values of servant leadership, dialogue, justice, peace, and integrity of creation, with wisdom as the underlying principle, the Holy Cross of Davao College created the Institute of Davao Studies, or IDS. The IDS is an institute established under the Center for Linkages, Internationalization, and Language Studies of Holy Cross of Davao College, dedicated to a mission in promoting the rich history of Davao and its cultural heritage through education, proper preservation, and research. IDS envisions to be the premier information hub for Davao-related studies and to form Davao region with citizens informed and proud of their history and culture. The IDS vision and mission is strengthened with its 4 pillars: heritage promotion, historic preservation, cultural relativism, and global integration. With these 4 pillars, the Institute will be able to achieve its goal in preserving and promoting Davao history and heritage. This year, IDS will strive hard and move forward in being the premier information hub in Davao region through its various activities such as webinars, historical research, and partnerships with government and non-government agencies. Join us as we embark this new journey of exploring, promoting, and preserving the rich history and culture of the Davaoenos. Tarabay, magkahiusa ta sa pag-amuma sa Davaoenyong kasaysayan, kultura ug tradisyon